Hi everyone, welcome back to this Saturday's walk and talk. Today I'm going to talk to you about the time change and how the days have gotten shorter and how they affect our kids in terms of their mental health and their behavior, and to address some of the things that we can do about it. It's also very important to point out that it doesn't just affect our kids, it affects us. These shorter days are a real killer. You know, it's dark by 5 o'clock. Seasonal depression starts to kick in. We feel a little more anxious, a little more irritable. It's a tough time. It's a tough time for everyone, which means when it's tough for us and if it's tough for our kids, we want to take the easy way out with our kids. And it's very easy for us to tell our kids to go hop on their gaming systems, jump onto their phones, YouTube, whatever social media we have, because it gets them out of our hair and it makes life easier for us because we just don't have the patience and we're tired. We're cranky ourselves. As a principal, I see it more so. I start to see an uptick in kids' behavior because they're not outside playing as much. They're not interacting with their friends as much because shorter days truly takes away from what they do and what they can do. And that's why we have to capitalize as much as possible when it is light outside. Because, and I've talked about this I don't know how many times, because Mother Earth is super important. Sunlight, going outside for a walk, fresh air, all of that's good for our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, and our physical well-being. And when that gets taken away from us, we're out of balance. So, you know, I've talked about the medicine wheel a lot. I've posted some clips on my story with some knowledge keepers talking about the medicine wheel. And at the end of the day, it's so true. It is so true. And the hardest thing is when we lose daytime and it gets darker faster, we lose those things that are super important to us. And that's being outside. It's super important. And being outside feeds our soul. So anyways, today I want to talk to you about some of the things that you can do at home to ease the burden of the shortened days that we all face. And you know, there's things that we should plan for because we want our kids to not be on technology. So I mean, we can plan for a lot of hands-on activities that they can do, whether it be Lego, blocks, Tonkas, Play-Doh, coloring, playing with toys, figurines. I mean, when I was a kid, I'd spend hours playing with my He-Man Master of the Universe toys or my WWE figurines. I was always the Undertaker because he's the best. I'm going to throw you a bone today, though, and get you guys to think about doing something a little more simple, something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's television. I know you're thinking television, well, that's another screen. It's like, yeah, it is. But it's also, well, actually growing up for us, television was the devil's playground, as I'm sure some of you remember, because we were not allowed inside to watch TV. And when we did, our parents would get judged because they used it. Some people would say they used it as a babysitter, but you know, us Gen Xers know that they actually didn't because we weren't allowed in the house. But TV was awesome. Anyways, I want to talk to you about supplementing your nighttime routines with television. I know some people are going to judge for that, but I want to approach it from an educational lens. And I want to approach it from a mental health lens because, like I mentioned earlier, seasonal depression is real. So, you know, I want to help as much as I can with parents to make it easier for them to make sure their kids don't go down rabbit holes that are going to cause their behavior to change or affect their mental well-being as well. And we know social media and technology does that. So, why television? The reason why I'm going to bring up television, or actually the reason why I'm going to bring up movies, is because it's a good supplement and it takes some pressure off of you for trying to constantly organize activities for your kids that doesn't involve you always having to figure out what kind of hands-on activities you need to plan for because you're tired and you're exhausted and you're irritable and you just want a break. And that's what makes the winter months so difficult. So my goal is to talk to you about hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. I'm a teacher, so I'm going to talk to you about the educational component. So we're going to talk about story development. Some of you are going, oh God, no. But story development is awesome because that's what makes movies awesome. So movies are a good replacement or a good alternative to a novel or a short story or a small book that your kids might read. The difference is you got to watch it and you got to be lazy. And to be honest, television is my vice. I can totally dig deep into binging an entire series on a Saturday and a Sunday sometimes. I just finished watching The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston. I just binged that. It was awesome. And then I binged The Tulsa King recently, which was also awesome. Matlock, binged that. So the reason why I want to bring the educational component in is because it'll put your mind at ease knowing that you get to have an educational piece to chilling out and watching a movie with your kid. The key to this though is you need to actually watch the movie with your kid or kids. And why not, while watching a movie with your kids, talk about setting, talking about the protagonist, the hero in the story who's going to come in and save the day, you know, or the antagonist, the villain, you know, or talking about rising action, all the events leading up to that big battle between Superman and Lex Luthor or whoever, you know, and then you can talk about the climax and you can talk about the falling action, all the events that kind of happen after the big event where everybody goes on and lives happily ever after. You know, those are all things that we teach in school. When we do novel studies, we do character analysis. We talk about themes. You know, you get to look at all the types of costumes. You can look at where the movie's taking place. So there's some social studies in there. You know, it's all really cool. So why not, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, instead of beating yourself up trying to plan all these hands-on activities, keeping your kids away from technology, throw in a movie or 2, you know? And so there's that educational component to that. And here's the cool thing about story development and teaching this piece is that when there's an antagonist and a protagonist, when there's a hero and a villain, the villain oftentimes is doing something wrong. And so all of my videos revolve around emotional intelligence. So this is the second bird that we're going to hit with that 1 stone. So the first bird is that educational component, that literary piece where we talk about all those facets of story development. The second piece is emotional intelligence, learning about right from wrong, watching the hero and the villain battle it out over doing right by people. You know, when the antagonist and the protagonist are doing battle, you get to talk to your kids about how the characters grow. You get to talk about foreshadowing, like making predictions. You get to talk about how emotions fuel the wrong decisions sometimes, or how emotions fuel the hero to step in and save the day. And you can take that and you can relate it to life. There's all kinds of teachable moments in there. You get to talk about how your own feelings or your kids' feelings affect what they do at school or at home. There's so many ways that you can build that emotional intelligence just from a movie. When you start talking about the characters and their emotions in the movie and how it's driving them to do the right or the wrong thing, there's a lot of teachable moments there between yourself as a parent and your kids. You get to talk about self-awareness. You get to talk about self-reflection. You get to talk about self-regulation. You get to talk about how you need to control your emotions. You get to talk about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, like we've talked about a million times in these videos. You know, there are so many movies. I'm a boy, or a man. Some would say I'm still a boy or a man-child. But I mean, I grew up loving, you know, I watched Harry Potter. Goonies. Oh man, you should get your kids to watch Goonies or Back to the Future or The Breakfast Club. Maybe not The Breakfast Club unless they're teenagers. With Christmas coming up, there's all kinds of movies that will allow you to dive into characterization where you get to analyze and look at the world from a different lens and teach your kids about all those wonderful things. You know, it's pretty cool. So give yourself a break. You don't have to sit there and do puzzles and color and have your kids doing Lego and whatnot. And quite honestly, you are allowed to let them game and do those sorts of things, but just put a limit on it. Don't let them dive in, and don't ignore the fact that they could be on YouTube looking at the wrong things for hours at a time, because what'll happen is their behavior will change because they'll learn things they're not supposed to, you know, and you'll get those flare-ups. And I know those of you who are watching are doing such a great job with the information that I'm giving you already, so let's not go backwards. So the third thing that I want to address is attachment. Attachment is super important to our kids' well-being. It's super important to their self-esteem. So we looked at story development, the educational component. We looked at emotional intelligence, which also affects our kids' ability to persevere and show grit and be determined and, problem solve and all those good things. You know, I can't tell you enough, or I can't state enough how important it is for kids to receive love and affection, and how awesome it is to snuggle up on the couch with your kid, and share in movie magic. Like I've said before, I'm a huge movie guy. I love going to the movies. I love going by myself. I love watching movies. I love watching TV. I escape. It's the way I can shut my brain off because I'm constantly thinking. And, one of the wonderful things is when you can sit there and watch a movie with your kids and you get to share that. And that attachment piece, when you're all snuggled up and it's comforting and your kids feel connected, that is so good for their well-being. Studies have shown that when your kids are attached to you and they feel safe and comfortable, it means that they're going to stay away from a lot of those things that are going to cause them some grief and some self-harm. And when you're snuggled up with your kids, not only is it good for them, but it's good for you. It's wonderful to just be calm, eating some popcorn. You probably want to do dinner a little bit early. You get to share, you get to laugh, you get to cry, you get to do all those things together. And there's nothing better than having that attachment with your kids. I can tell you just really simply, the more you do things with your kids and the more you're available to them, especially in calm, quiet times like watching a movie, it's going to have a wonderful impact on your relationship with them. They're going to feel safe. They're going to trust you more. They're going to feel loved. They're going to be able to cope with stress more. They're going to be able to talk about their day more. Because these next 3 months are going to be hard. So if we can do things at home that help you and help your kid with their behavior and their self-esteem and their well-being, because they're not getting it outside as much, except for when they're at school, they get recess and lunch hour, and hopefully you have them in some activities and stuff like that. But when it gets dark early and Mother Earth disappears, we definitely miss out on pieces of the medicine wheel. And it's not hard to lose one of those quadrants, whether it be our emotional well-being or physical well-being or our spiritual well-being. And and it's super important to be outside and to have sunlight and to be able to go fishing or go for a hike and play at the playground with your friends. And when that disappears, we have to find other ways to stay connected and to make sure that we're staying balanced within those 4 quadrants of the medicine wheel. And it's harder, like I said, when it gets dark out, but we can do it. And having your kids lined up with hands-on activities at home is great, but that does take a lot of prepping sometimes, and your kids will get bored of it. So that's why I'm suggesting throwing movies. Do something easy, and get lost in it and make it educational. And it's a good way to teach about emotional intelligence and attach with your kids. It's just all wonderful. So on that note, we will see you 2 Saturdays from now. Peace out, my friends.